Welcome to the very first behind the scene episode on my channel, where I will take you through the process of one of my projects. In the last couple of days I released this image and I had some people ask me how I made it, so I decided to make a video about it. This is the final image that I came up with, and it's based on a reference image that I found that looks like this. So I wanted to recreate this scene and try to match the lighting as close as possible. In the end, I did stray away a bit from it, but I think I managed pretty well. And I'm not used to making interiors, so this was a learning experience for me. I would probably make more of these because it was quick and fun. So I'm going to take you through the whole process of this, which includes how I did the modeling, texturing, lighting and rendering, and also post-production. This project was created in Maya and rendered in Redshift. And let's have a look at the modeling. To the left here you can see the viewport with the camera, render camera, looking at the scene, and to the right we have the perspective camera that I used to fly around the scene. So the first thing I want to mention is that I tried to keep the interior scene closed, so I don't have any open walls out that can cause any like stray lighting or issues like that. And the first thing you notice is that everything that is outside of the camera is basically ignored. So I have these very simple geometries here, just covering up the interior so I don't get any stray light. And the material on these are basically trying to match the color of the walls, so it bounces the correct light around. That's it. Let's have a look at the modeling itself. It's a very basic, I would say, subdivision modeling, but very sloppy in a sense. And I didn't, for example, parts that are not going to be visible, I didn't spend much time on them. And the topology is a bit crap at certain pieces, but I didn't really mind. I just wanted to work fast. So you can see here I tried to give all the tiny edges bevels, so it looks natural. Same thing on the cupboard here. I'd say the most difficult part is the camera match. When you have a ref image like this and you don't know what focal length they use to the camera, I had to go back and forth, and so you can see here that I project the image on the camera plane, and I can model this way. So I think I started with finding out the size of the stairs. They usually have a common size in Sweden at least, which is somewhere around 90 and 100 centimeters wide. So when I knew that, I took a guess at the focal length at around, I think I ended up at 35 millimeter. And then it's just a matter of moving around the camera until you find the correct spot. It's not 100% on, but I think it's as good as I could get it. Then I modeled everything very simple, basically in the same manner as this the background planes, if you want to call them that, just to make sure that the camera was correctly set up. And then I started to model the real models and just swap out the temporary ones as I go. So there's nothing crazy going on here is just regular modeling. I decided to model the panels on the walls as well because it was pretty quick to do. To make one of them and then just copy them around. So it's the same panel all the way around. This trim here for the floor, I reused that around the windows as well. And for the actual window frames, I used some simple refs that I found online just to see how they were put together. They also have double glass in them, which is common practice in Sweden, because we have cold winters. And it gives, I think it gives the reflections a bit of depth as well. Even though you can't really see it in the render, it's a very tiny part of the image. And yeah, that's basically it for the things that I modeled. Oh, the floor as well, which is super basic. Just trying to make sure that I don't have any big holes anywhere that cause problems. And then we have these models over here. The two plants I bought from Poliigon, and the stool I bought from Megascans. I could of course have modeled this as well, but I wanted some really good photorealistic assets in there, or quickly basically, because I wanted a quick turnaround for this. It was mostly an exercise in photorealistic rendering, so I think that was it for the modeling. Let's move on to texturing. Okay, on to texturing. I will begin with the floor. The floor texture comes from Texturesupply, which has some really nice super high res textures, which I think they are scanned and prepared really well. I really like this fishbone style wooden floor, which I then cut out some of the pieces and rotated them so I can puzzle them in together to create this little piece in front of the stair, which I think gives the floor some realistic touch. Textures for the assets that I bought are included in the package, so I haven't made those. And then we have the rest, which is all of these assets. So for this project, I really wanted to create some custom textures for the edge nudging, so I get them in the correct places that I want them. I could have done the shading straight into Maya with tiling textures, but I find that it's very hard to control where to get the details if you do it that way. So for this project, I wanted to try to texture all of this once in Substance Painter, and I used UDIMs to achieve that. So if we have a look at the UV map here, there's nothing special about the UV mapping either. I just made it the quickest way I could. The seams doesn't really matter for Substance Painter, so I basically went through, selected all the edges, cut the seam, and laid it out with an automatic map for basically all the things in the scene. The walls have kind of slightly lower resolution than the other because they are so tall. I could have split them up and put them on more UDIMs, but they're basically white, so I saved some time doing the sloppy way. So they are just automatically unfolded. Same thing here, just select edges and auto unwrap. You can see here as well that there are some unnecessary seams going on. I don't really care about that for something like this. I did try to orient the shells so that I get the with the wooden pattern in mind. I want the wooden pattern to go in certain directions on the props. And in the stairs as well. So that's one thing to keep in mind, to have them rotated. I actually missed some of the faces on the cupboard, so I had to rotate them in Substance Painter, but it's not a big issue. So when I have those assets, so 5 UDIMs, also made a fake floor for it because I wanted to bake some maps, and I want the ambient occlusion to bounce onto the object. So I made this fake floor which I mapped to the wall UDIM just in the corner. It's not going to be used for anything. Selected all of that and exported it for Substance Painter. So let's head on to Painter and have a look in there. Okay, so here we are in Substance Painter. I have the scene loaded. The first thing I do is I bake my mesh maps. Don't have to bake it to full resolution. I used 4K for my UDIMs. If we have a look at the baked maps, we have the ones that I'm interested in is usually ambient occlusion. Which we use to generate some of the dirt in the crevices. We have the curvature, which is used to generate edge, damage, nudging. The other ones I don't use much. Position, thickness. World space can be good if you want to project something from world space coordinates, basically. Yeah, and not too many materials here. Base, or for the wooden stuff, is this clean veneer from Texturesupply, which looks like this. This is the wood that you see when I scratch off paint from the green stuff. So then I created a really simple paint material for the walls. And then I made a slightly off-color white for the window frame to just have some variation there. And then I made the paint for the wooden stuff. Made actually two fill layers for this, one for horizontal and one for vertical, because I screwed up with the UVs. So you can see here that the pattern of the wood goes vertically on this part. So I had to create another material only for these faces where I rotate the wood grain. Then I paint that in wherever I want that. I also have the edge wear in these masks. You can see that here. Then for the knobs here, just a simple material from the library in Substance Painter. And that's basically all the base materials. I tried to put edge nudging on all the edges where I thought it made sense for people to, when they live here, they knock into the the edges of things. On the wall here, maybe you grab your hand on the edge or something. On top of the base materials, I added some dust. You see it very lightly here in the stairs. So here's the mask for the dust. Barely visible, but I think it adds a lot in the roughness. Make it a bit rough in the corners. And then some black marks. Just randomly painted out black marks. And that's it. And I export this with the Redshift preset and then move back to Maya. Part that I like with using UDIMs is that I can now create a single shader for this, for all of these assets. I hook up the color texture and I define that it's using the UDIM workflow. So it will find the correct tile number in the textures. The textures looks like this. So you have tile 1001, 1002, and Maya will automatically find that if you choose UV tiling mode UDIM here. That means I only need to have one shader for that stuff. Basically one shader for the floor. Same setup here, PBR, color, roughness, and normal map, basically. Nothing in this scene is metallic, so I don't have to use any textures for the metalness or anything like that. Yeah, I think that's it for the texturing. I have a big plane here, which basically has an alpha hooked up to the opacity channel. I wanted to have some kind of variation in the you can see, like in the shadows you can barely see it, but it's there. Yeah, so that's the texturing part. Let's move on to lighting and rendering. So the lighting is super simple in this scene. It is just you go into the environment and you click create here on physical sun and sky. You get a dome light, or you don't even get a dome light, you get a node called RS physical sky, which is basically a dome light. It's the environment. The sky, where you can change different settings to get different looks. And then you get this sun direction, which you rotate around to decide where you want your sun to come from. And depending on like the angle of the light, it will change the color of the sky. So the only thing I made to this was I changed the softness of the shadow to 5 because I wanted to get that it has these soft edges on the afternoon sun. So that's what I was trying to achieve with that, and I just rotated it around until I found a good spot for the shadows. I also had to open up the door to get the correct amount of light around just the stool and the bonsai tree here. So that's it for the lighting. There are no other secrets going on there. When it comes to rendering, trying to use unified sampling, the maximum 2024, and I'm kind of lazy, so I use sampling overrides and just max it out. That usually gives me a good render time and noise. Yeah, we can have a look here in the render view. So whenever I work, I usually take the resolution down a bit to make it more responsive. Quicker to iterate when you have lights in the scene. I can start the IPR rendering. So in Redshift, when you're doing some look dev work, you use the IPR. And I have the optics denoiser, so as you can see, it cleans up the image really fast, which makes it very quick and intuitive to, for example, change the lighting conditions like this. Just have to wait like 2 or 3 seconds. I'm using a single NVIDIA RTX 3090 to do this. So here I'm changing the angle of the light, and you can see it becomes more and more yellow. Now all of a sudden we have a dawn. Really late sun. And that's basically it. When it comes to post-processing, I have a LUT here. I can't remember where I found this or if it comes with Redshift, but it's a photographic LUT. I also use the color controls to manage the exposure. Photographic exposure is very important. Makes a lot of difference to have that activated. You can play around with allow desaturation or any of these options. I changed the white point, which is basically white balance. Bloom is very nice to have if you have strong lights. Let's rotate this up a bit again, and you can see the very strong light here at the white window frame, how it blooms out. It gives it that, it bleeds the light over the edge of things and make it look more realistic. Some flare that doesn't do much, and some streaks as well. And that's basically it. I increased the resolution basically, and then hit the final render button. So when that image is done, I export it as a PNG in this case because I have no client and I don't need to do any AOV compositing or anything like that, so I kept it simple. And inside of Photoshop I use my usual photography workflow basically. This is the raw render, and I go into camera raw where I have some really good profiles, like film photography profiles from a company called the Archetype process. So one that I really like is the Portra 400. So I apply that and you can see that it gives a bit different colors. And then I can go through just like I do with the photography stuff, increase the exposure, go in and change all of this stuff. Color mixer is very good if you want to change, say the green for example is kind of off, you can drag that to, you know, change the color of it. And yeah, so I kept it very simple. I went through and tweaked some of this stuff to my liking, and it's done basically. So I will link all the assets in the description below if you want to have a look at Poliigon, Megascans, Texturesupply, any of that. And if you have any questions or would like to drop a comment, you're more than welcome to do so. I hope you enjoyed this little behind the scene episode, and have a good day. Bye bye.